now available in paperback and e-readers, the legendary Mad Matilda. Get the conclusion to the Spinsterella trilogy in paperback and e-readers on online booksellers today. In many of my goth-related videos, I have made the statement that there are three phases of goth, and in this video, I'm going to go in depth more about that theory. Now, I've heard many adolescent goths or baby bats make the phrase, goth is not a phase, and the reason why they make that phrase is because they want to tell their parents and their family members and their friends that goth is not a fad that they're into for a little while, that this is something that they want to commit to. And when there are people who have been a part of the subculture for 15, 20, 25, and 30 years, we see that goth is a lifestyle to those people. And as they enter the subculture to become a part of that lifestyle, they have to go through a growing phase, as I see it. And the first phase of that is the baby bat phase. Now, the baby bat phase is where the person is starting to discover that they're darkly inclined and that they're starting to see goth as something that they want to be a part of. And during this stage, they're starting to find out what the core bands are as related to the music, and they're starting to learn some things about the fashion. And on both the male and the female side, they're learning a bit more about the makeup and the aesthetics of goth. And during this stage, a lot of people are starting to find and learn the basics, and they're starting to meet up with people online these days, or in the past they would go to places like your goth clubs or your darkly inclined places, or places where darkly inclined people hang out, like comic book stores and other events like comic conventions. And they would all come together to these events, and they would learn from each other more about the subculture and things related to the subculture, or they would go and learn about it at various places like music stores and other places like stores that sell goth related clothing, and they would learn more about the subculture, more about the style, and they would learn things about the subculture overall from people in the baby bat phase. And in the baby bat phase, you're learning about the clothes, you're learning about the styles, you're learning about the aesthetics of goth. And that's something you learn in the baby bat phase as you start to come into the subculture. Now, the second phase is related to what I call the adolescent stage. And it's during this stage that a person is deciding what they want to be as a part of the subculture, and if they want to stay in the subculture. This is something a lot of people don't want to talk about, which is the adolescent phase, because in the baby bat phase, you'll have a lot of people at the start coming into the subculture. They're seeing it as nice, it's new, it's different. But when it comes down to the adolescent stage, this is where we have the crossroads. And at this crossroads, this is where a person decides if they want to really be serious about staying into the subculture and staying into the scene. And during this stage, they're trying to figure out what role they want to play in the subculture and what they want to do as a part of the subculture. So this adolescent phase is filled with a lot of growing pains, because it's during this phase that many goths who are teenagers are starting to become young adults, and they're starting to transition into adult life. And as they transition into adult life, they're trying to figure out how they can fit their lifestyle in the subculture into their regular everyday routines. And that's a major challenge, because when you are a person who is goth, it's a major challenge to try to find things like jobs that are tolerant of you being alternative and living an alternative lifestyle and expressing yourself with alternative fashion, and will allow you to do that in their workplace. And a lot of people, they have a lot of struggles as related to being alternative in adult life, because you have to try to find a way to make this lifestyle work and find a way to make a living while you are living this lifestyle. And this is the big major challenge of transitioning in the adolescent phase. One of the major challenges of the adolescent phase of being goth is trying to maintain your goth identity while you are trying to establish yourself as an adult in arenas like the business world and in social arenas that are outside of the subculture, because mainstream culture has a whole different thing and you have to try to find ways to adapt to it. And this is what leads to a lot of the growing pains for many young adult goths as they transition out of high school and college into the adult world of work. And this is why I call it the adolescent phase, because during adolescence you go through a lot of growing pains and then you learn you have to make a lot of different sacrifices in order to make us survive and make a living in the mainstream world. And those sacrifices may include changing your makeup while you're at work or changing your clothes while you're at work to be able to make the living so that you can go out here and live that alternative lifestyle that you want to live. And then you'll have to deal with people who will try to tell you that, you're a poser or you're compromising. And those are a lot of challenges that a goth would face in their social circles, but then they have to deal with a lot of the pressures outside of those social circles as they try to navigate a course for their adult life. Because many goths who are online, they don't look that way when they go to work, because when they go to work, they have to look a certain way in order to survive. And that's something that people have to deal with during the adolescent phase of being a goth. And they also have to deal with the whole thing where they're thinking about whether they want to stay committed to being a part of this subculture and whether they want to keep staying in this subculture and make it a part of their lifestyle and their way of life. Because during the baby bat phase, it's all fun and games for a lot of people because they come in as teenagers, and when you're a teenager, mom and dad are primarily taking care of you, or you have a job like fast food where you can go out here and you have the money to go buy goth fashions and stuff and buy makeup because you're pretty primarily living under your mother's roof or your parents' roof. But as you enter the adult world, it's a lot trickier to find ways to stay in the subculture and maintain that lifestyle, because it's an alternative lifestyle, and most people who are a part of the regular world aren't used to seeing people who live a goth lifestyle. They don't understand it, and they have no real. Some of them really don't want to understand it. So it's a real struggle, the adolescent phase, as I see it, to try to navigate a course for a goth who wants to stay in the subculture and find a way to keep making a living and find a way to stay committed to the subculture and keep it as part of their lifestyle. And it's also a real challenge for a goth to find what role they want to play in the subculture and what they want to do as a part of the subculture. These are all things someone has to try to figure out during the adolescent phase of being a goth. Now, the third phase is what many would call the elder goth phase, or as I call it, the adult phase of being a goth. And this is the phase where a person is established in their life and has established goth as their lifestyle and their way of life, and they have established what role they want to play in the subculture. During this role, as the elder or adult phase, this is where a person has clearly defined who they are as a goth, what they want to do in the subculture, and what they want to pass on to others in the subculture. Because what makes a subculture strong is people teaching the culture to the next generation. This is how cultures get passed on from generation to generation, because the teachers of culture take the culture that they have learned and then they pass it on to the next generation of people. And this is what the elders or the adult goths do in the subculture. What they do is they take the culture they have learned and they share it with younger goths so that they can learn what's important about the subculture. And during the elder phase, this is where the person, again, is, in most cases, if they have a job or they have a business, they're established, they have a way of making money for themselves, they have a residence, they have everything set up where they feel comfortable in life, and they're at a place where they feel secure in where they are and where they're going. And it's during this phase that this person starts to think about passing the culture on to the next generation so that they can understand what's important about the subculture and why it's important to them and why it's important to future generations in the subculture. And this adult phase is the phase where people who are in the subculture actualize who they are and find out where they want to be. Again, this is a place where they are solid in who they are, comfortable in who they are, and relaxed about who they are. When you're an adult goth, that's when you're at the most comfortable about where you are and about sharing with others. That's when you start feeling really comfortable about sharing with others, and in some cases, mentoring baby bats and giving them the support that they need as they come into the subculture and teaching it. And I learned all about these three phases of goth and came into this theory while doing my research for writing my three novels in the Spinsterella trilogy. And in this Spinsterella trilogy, we see the Matilda Crowley character go from a baby bat and spellbound to the adolescent phase in the legendary Mad Matilda to the elder goth phase in Spinsterella. And I wanted to really chronicle the three phases of goth with these three novels so that people would get an understanding of what it's like to be a goth and what the three different phases of the subculture are. Because when I first came into it in 2015, when I was writing Spinsterella, I was just writing a story about an African American goth, and I thought that that would be enough. But as I learned more about the subculture, I said to myself, this is just not enough. And if people are really going to learn about this subculture and learn why it's important to people who have a darker view of life, they need to know about all the aspects of the subculture and why they're important. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote Spellbound, because I wanted people to understand why somebody becomes interested in the goth subculture and why they want to become a part of the goth subculture. And then after I wrote Spellbound, I said to myself, again, that's just not enough for people who want to enter the subculture and learn more about it. They really need to know more about the adolescent phase, because the adolescence phase is tremendously important, because a lot of people, they see the goth scene and they think, oh, the person at the baby bat phase, but they need baby bat phase is just the start of someone coming into the subculture, and the adolescent phase is often overlooked. And this is where many goths wind up leaving the scene, because what happens is that they come in as a baby bat and then they leave because there's nobody really to give them support and guidance, and that's why a lot of people don't stay in subculture that long. And then the ones who do stay, they're the ones who overcome the adolescent phase and they find out what person they want to be in the subculture, what role they want to play in the subculture, and they find a way to navigate and overcome all the obstacles as related to finding a way to stay spooky while staying professional on a job, or finding a way to stay spooky while they build a business. And these are things that I go a bit more in depth with Legendary Mad Matilda, where the Matilda Crowley character starts making her transition from the club scene and college and starts laying a foundation for building her future in corporate America. Now, I know that there are some people in the subculture who don't want to work in corporate America, but you still have to find a way to make a living, and you still have to find a way to transition from the baby bat phase to the adolescent phase so that you can find what role you want to play in the subculture as a young adult and what direction you want to go in with your life if you want to stay in the subculture and if you want to stay committed to the subculture. And this is the whole thing about these three phases, is that they are all part of growing into the subculture and growing making the goth subculture a part of your lifestyle. Because as I saw it, the goth who you are at 16 is not who you are at 21 or 23 or 25, and it's definitely not who you are at 40 or 45. And as you get older, you grow, you change, and you become a different person. And as a goth grows, they grow and change in different ways because they're learning different things. Like when you go as a baby bat, you start out, maybe your clothes are one way, but as you grow into the adolescent phase, you start discovering different styles and different fashions and different aesthetics, and you're trying them on to find out what fits you. And then as you become the elder or adult, you found what you're comfortable with, and that is your style, and that's your aesthetic, and that's what you grow into. And that's what I mean by the way you were as a goth at 16 is not who you are at 21, 22, and 23, and it's definitely not who you are at 30, 40, or 45, or even 50, because there are people who stay in the subculture and have been a part of the subculture for 15 years, 16 years, 20 years, 25 years, and some have been in the subculture for 40 years, which is the whole history of the goth subculture. And as I was writing the Spinsterella trilogy, I wanted to show, again, how this character, Matilda Crowley, chronicled over that course of close to 20 some odd years in the subculture, and why she wanted to stay in the subculture, and what the subculture meant to her, and why she grew into goth, and how she grew into goth, and how she transitioned from her baby bat phase in the novel Spellbound to the adolescent phase and dealing with the growing pains of being in the adolescent phase of goth in Legendary Mad Matilda, to the Spinsterella where she is the elder goth. And I wanted to show that there are people who stay in the subculture for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and 40 years, because goth isn't a phase that an adolescent goes through. It is a lifestyle, and as it being a lifestyle, it is something that people grow into and something people grow old into if they feel that it's the lifestyle that's right for them. You can pick up the books in the Spinsterella trilogy, Spellbound, The Legendary Mad Matilda, and Spinsterella on Amazon.com by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.